injured, including 3 children. I would like to give some numbers that demonstrate this vicious acts of the people in Bankovo Street, Belgorod region, July 10-11. As a result of the shelling by the Ukrainian armed forces, 2 women and a man were killed in the village of Novaya Volzhanka. 1 more civilian died from the drone attack on a car. July 13, detonated drone killed 5 people in Srebrenica. As a result of the drone attack against a car on Arkhangelsk-Shamina road, 1 civilian was injured. July 14, Shigarevka village, a drone killed a boy. Region of Bryansk, July 12-15, Lomakovka and Sluchovsk villages, drone attacks killed 2 women. Voronezh region, on the morning of July 15, as a result of a massive attack by enemy drones, 1 civilian was killed, 21 people were injured, among them 4 children. 2 more people were injured in one of the districts of the region, Kursk region. We regret to report that on July 9th, during transportation to a hospital in Moscow, a 5-year-old boy, Toля Minashkin, died. He was injured on July 8th by an enemy drone. He was injured on a beach in Kursk. During the barbaric attack by the Ukrainian nationalists, he acted with remarkable bravery for his age, shielding his mother and suffering severe burns. The responsibility for the death of this little hero lies with the Western sponsors of Kyiv, who continue to supply the Bandera regime with deadly and destructive weapons. They completely lost the desire to speak about the human rights. July 10, a 73 person died. In Kursk, 11 July, Sukhodol, another person was killed. During the mining operation, 2 people died on July 14, Lipetsk region. At night, 2 people were injured as a result of the fall of a drone on the territory of an agricultural enterprise. Tula region, during the aftermath of a nighttime attack by enemy drones on Tula, on July 11, a rescue worker was killed. Kherson region, city of Alyoshki, 11th of July, drone destroyed a building and killed people. Searching for people were hampered by the attack of drones from the side of the Ukrainian forces. On the 13th of July, in the region of Alyoshki, 2 women and 1 man were injured. On the 9th of July, in Gorlovka, a woman and a man were injured. At night, a city was attacked on July 11. 3 people were injured as a result of UAV attacks. The Russian courts continue to sentence mercenaries for their crimes in Kursk region against civilians, and there are a lot of people who were sentenced and captured. Among them, there are people Yuri Sienkiewicz, Maxim Strinets, Konstantin Mrovchak, Vladimir Dmysh, Alexei Babenko, 17 years old, Bogdan Didok, 17 years old, Roman Zhmuydin, 16 years old, Maxim Zlotarenko, 15, Sergei Pachkov, 15, Dmitry Verbitsky, 16, Alexander Vysotsky, 16, Sergei Baranyuk, 16, Sergei Valchuk, 14 years old. Look at them all, those who got these long sentences. If you look at the date of birth of these people, they are not only young people, they are those mentioned by Zelensky as children. It is all reminiscent of the fascist Hitler youth. They're killing their lives, and at Bankovo Street they receive a lot of money for this. a sniper of the neo-Nazi battalion Azov was convicted for the murder in March 2022 of two residents of Mariupol for 24 years. The British mercenary Adam William was sentenced to 14 years of imprisonment in absentia. He was placed on the international wanted list. And with all that, Zelensky decided to mark this day and celebrate the day of baptism of Kyiv, Ukraine. It was celebrated on 15 July. I would like to remind you that it was established by Zelensky in the year 2021, and it was a day of baptism of Kyiv, Ukraine. What does it mean? What does this celebration mean? Why they changed the date? It was shifted from 28th of July, when the Orthodox world celebrates the baptism adopted in 1988 year. They wanted to kill the canonic church, and they do this consequently. And speaking on this matter, Zelensky didn't mention at all why they call this Kyiv, Ukraine, but he spoke a lot about the important event, as he thought of this, that underlines the links between eras and generations, high values of the Ukrainian people, and the ability of Ukrainians, according to Zelensky, to overcome hardships. He didn't say that these hardships that for Ukrainians were connected with his activities. Of course, he has deliberately overlooked the real state of affairs in the country, in Ukraine, that turned into the Western colony and risks losing its statehood. Zelensky didn't speak about the fact that in order to keep his power, he's ready to sacrifice the faith of millions of his fellow citizens and Ukraine itself. And his view on establishment of the Ukraine as a country, he included canonic Orthodox Church, and everything that left of the Orthodox religion shall be destroyed. And we can see how they distort and falsify facts of history, Ukrainization of the people from the time of existence of the princes, Ukrainization of outstanding personalities of the era of existence of the ancient Russia state, the great princes of Kiev, Yaroslav the Wise, Vladimir Monomach. This all underlines the desire to create Kiev, Rus, and Ukraine, to turn it into the only heir of the Kiev Rus. There is no doubt that all the story of Zelensky will fail, and no matter how hard they try on the Bankova Street to substitute facts of history with their own version, they won't be able to succeed. And it can be seen by the empty temples taken away from the Orthodox Church throughout Ukraine. They can take away the walls, but they cannot take away the soul of the people. They do everything possible to impose on believers their own idea of holiday dates and how it shall be celebrated, if at all. But they will never get the results they need. They demonstrate their force. They do everything by force to deprive people of the freedom of conscience and statehood. We heard a lot that Ukraine is fighting for its sovereignty, and we need to help Ukraine with it in this week. Let us look at the facts. 35 years ago, on July 16, 1990, the Supreme Council of the USSR adopted the Declaration on State Sovereignty, according to which Ukraine, and I'm citing, solemnly declares its intention to become, in the future, a permanently neutral state that does not participate in military blocs, adheres to 3 non-nuclear principles: not to accept, not to produce, and not to acquire nuclear weapons. It also proclaimed the equality of citizens of the Republic, including on the basis of their language. These are the characteristic features of the sovereignty of Ukraine. Subsequently, reference to the declaration was included in the Act of Proclamation of Independence of Ukraine of 24 August 1991. These norms were also incorporated in the Constitution of Ukraine. I will remind you, it was adopted on 28 June 1996. However, none of the above mentioned have been respected by those who seized power after the military coup in February 2014. These people deprive Ukraine of its sovereignty by undermining the principles of this sovereignty, which was the foundation. The existence of Ukraine gives a refusal, with the assistance of the West, of the legal foundations of the Ukrainian existence as an independent, peaceful state has become a purposeful course of neo-Nazi dictatorship that destroy all Russians and pose a security threat to Russia and all Europe. Therefore, the complete and irreversible eradication of all of the causes that led to the emergence of the Ukrainian crisis remains the main requisite for achieving a final and fair settlement of the conflict. The sooner this is understood at the Bankova Street and by the Western countries, the sooner it will be resolved. The Conference on Reconstruction of Ukraine, 10-11 July, Rome celebrated the conference with the participation of 5,000 delegates from 70 countries and 40 international organizations. I would like to remind you the similar events was celebrated in 2017. It was conducted from 2017 to 2022 on the issues of reformation of Ukraine. And for the 4th year, the main attention is focused on military assistance to Kyiv regime. That is not to restore Ukraine, but to destroy it. The discussion on this issue, the tone of the discussion of this topic was set by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who clearly stated the need to invest in Ukraine superiority in the military technical sphere. She made it clear that the Readiness 2030 plan to allocate 800 billion euros can be spent on Ukraine as well. She proposed to use the underutilized capacities of its military enterprises to ensure the defense capabilities, you would think, of Ukraine, but not the defense capabilities of the European Union. And she actively advertised military orders on to place military orders of the Ukrainian, place them on the Ukrainian market for arms and military equipment, and by this increase the military capabilities of Europe. According to von der Leyen, this assistance to the regime of Zelensky will make it possible for NATO members to easily carry out the required regulations required by Washington to bring the defense expenditures to the level of 5% of GDP. I think that if there were a hypocrisy competition, then this situation would win the competition and would take a special prize, because first they were saying that they needed to protect Ukraine, and then they stated that Ukraine is a fortress of some sort, and now they need to place military orders in Ukraine with the help of Ukrainians to get through Ukraine money to maintain, and not only to maintain, but to send them to Washington. As for the restoration of Ukraine, there were different numbers of costs for these purposes, but it wasn't an important thing. Ursula von der Leyen said another thing, and she said it literally. Now Ukraine is a way to pay Washington, who increased tariffs up to 5% of the GDP of the economies of Europe. Shmyhal, for example, mentioned a number of $1 trillion, from which $540 billion should be covered through by means of Russian assets, and the rest shall be covered by the European Union. The most pointless and meaningless speech at the conference was that of Zelensky. He used his insinuations about endless drone attacks of Russia, and with that excuse he was begging from allies new resources for strengthening systems of air defense, production of drones, interceptors and missiles. He called for a systematic and regular nature of aid to Kyiv and proposed to turn it into a kind of post-war U.S. Marshall Plan for Western Europe. Just imagine, Europe openly says them at the Bankova Street that they will use them to pay Washington, and the Kiev continue asking for money. All this shows that this is a corruption scheme between Brussels and the Kiev regime. The West, with all its elites and political circles, and Bankova Street are all connected in this sense. He proposed to create a coalition for reconstruction, and called on partners not to be shy, and demanded them to give as much as possible to Ukraine, because Ukraine is now allegedly preparing for winter and spends its own money on it. Or what do they mean by their own money? Maybe Zelensky thought of his personal money, because there we can find not only for preparation for winter, but for several continents. Money for several continents to be prepared for winter. His pleas were not heard, and Ursula von der Leyen said that what they can use is a fund for the reconstruction of Ukraine, with the initial capital of about 200 million euros. The total amount of investments announced during the conference did not exceed 10 billion euros, because this is for the reconstruction. They spent a lot of billions for killing of people, not for reconstruction. For comparison, in 2024, in Berlin, it was possible to collect promises for 16 billion euros. A year earlier in London, 60 billion euros were announced. This is a sort of affair of untrue promises that they had in Rome. The result could not be different, because everybody understands that they are invited to contribute in their territory in Ukraine, which has rampant corruption and lawlessness. And it's not independent, because we are speaking about the country immersed. We are talking about a country which is a colony for the West. As for the summit of coalition of the willingness,
on July 10th this year, the sixth summit of the Coalition of the Willing, with the participation of representatives of 32 states and international organizations, took place in a hybrid format. And its main inspirator was the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and the French President Emmanuel Macron, who held the discussion at the joint headquarters of the British Armed Forces Command in Northwood. And they were joined from Rome, from the fields of the above-mentioned conference on the restoration of Ukraine, by Volodymyr Zelensky, as well as by Keith Kellogg, Special Envoy of the U.S. President for Ukraine, Senators Lindsey Graham, who is an extremist and terrorist, and Richard Blumenthal. As a result of the summit, a formula of foreign support for Ukraine was confirmed immediately after the ceasefire was reached. They emphasized the need for a so-called, as they refer to it, multinational force Ukraine. And their mandate is to restore the combat potential of the Ukrainian armed forces, ground forces, through the assistance of experts in armaments, military training, and logistics. Macron and Starmer also announced plans for joint patrols with the Ukrainian Air Force and air, as well as part of a mine countermeasures group at sea, as they say, to ensure the restoration of the Ukrainian army and to send a strategical signal to Moscow. Macron also announced an increase in the size of the potential French-British contingent for possible deployment on the territory of Ukraine after the ceasefire from the level of a brigade to the level of an army corps. As they say, it will now amount to about 50,000 people. The creation of a permanent multinational operational headquarters under British-French leadership, which will be called Multinational Force Ukraine, which will be alternately stationed in Paris or London, as well as a coordination center in Kyiv, which should be headed by a two-star general of the British Army, was announced. What kind of sovereignty of Ukraine are they even talking about? But at the same time, the final joint statement and press release failed to mention the need for U.S. support for these plans. However, the British and French supposedly have not given up the idea of involving the U.S. in their brave plans, emphasizing the guarantee and not auxiliary as before nature of the multinational force Ukraine. And I am quoting all of this here, all the details of their work, for just one person to pose one question, not a rhetorical one, but a very practical one. Where, among all of this, has there been a mention, or supposedly someone gave a thought to the word negotiations, to peace? Because it wasn't that long ago that they scream about the need for ceasefire, that we should take a pause and there should be negotiations. They asked for the place at the negotiations table. And how long has it been? It's barely been 2 weeks, and apparently that all along, while talking about the peaceful negotiations, they were preparing for the creation of these multinational force Ukraine. So whether we should believe them and what's actually in their minds, we have repeatedly declared the absolute unacceptability of the deployment in Ukraine of units of the armed forces of other states under any flag. We regard this as the preparation of foreign intervention. We'll regard such so-called multinational forces as a legitimate military objective. These facts and everything else that just does not fit the time limit of the briefing confirm the relevance of a special military operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine and eliminate threats emanating from its territory. All its objectives will certainly be achieved. And about the amazing what we've spoken already about the contraband of the Kyiv regime of the Western armaments. We've already raised this issue and the contraband of arms. This remains a truly profiting business for Bankovaya. And they count the turnout of billions of dollars, not per year, but per month. The very same money that Zelensky is trying to bribe from the West in order to fill the holes in his budget, while thousands of young Ukrainians fall victims. And against this backdrop, the Ukrainian junta is getting richer and richer. The unlawful trade is fully controlled by the organized crime that is being condoned by the corrupted officials. And the volumes of these contrabanda are insane. Only according to the official data, which is significantly understated, from January to April 2025, in attempts to illegally export to European Union countries, more than 2,100 units of weapons, primarily firearms and anti-tank missile systems, were seized. Just think about it. Missile systems that are being smuggled from the Ukrainian territory. How do we feel about this? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Let's keep going. Allow me to recall that in April 2024, the Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Klemenko, has admitted that the population disposes of about 1 to 5 million units of firearms in the hands of the population. And how exactly did the Ukrainian population get their hands on that? This is what they obtained legally, what they purchased or what they've stolen. And the arms smuggling abroad is happening through several routes, and one of them is the land route through south of Poland. And after that, it just dissipates in the European space. The transit infrastructure to Hungary, Romania, Poland, and Slovakia is also used. One of the transit points for illegal weapons from Ukraine remains Moldova. In the Balkans, there is a whole hub for arms to be smuggled from Ukraine. And the smuggling is taking place not through some shady schemes online, but literally out in the open. A new transit point has been created in the Finland. They're actively using maritime routes, as well as Port of Odessa to Bulgaria, Turkey, Montenegro, and African countries, as well as air routes from western regions of Ukraine, utilizing aircraft being shipped toward the Middle East, which we've also spoken about. Cases of Western arms appearing in various corners of the world have become more frequent, and the issue is so widespread that even Western intelligence agency have to recognize it. Perhaps someone would like to say that there's no way. I would like to give you an example. On May 17 this year, during operational investigative activities conducted by Interpol in the main port of Montenegro, a significant shipment of German firearms was discovered, totaling, do you know how much? 20,000, 50,000 euros? No, 30 million euros. Can you imagine? Firearms worth so much money. At the end of May this year, the U.S. Department of Defense began investigating cases of the terrorist organization Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, using Western-made weapons, as well as identifying the supply routes for military goods. Turned out that this weaponry had been obtained from Ukraine during the special operation conducted by the U.S. Armed Forces. American-made M141 hand grenades and M72 RPGs, as well as Javelin anti-tank missile systems supplied to the Ukrainian armed forces as part of the Western military aid from Poland were seized. Currently, the American military is investigating the use of weapons from Ukraine in the ongoing conflict, where in Sudan. Smuggled Western weapons from Ukraine are already being used by criminal groups in Western Europe, specifically in France, Britain, and Germany. There are recorded cases of firearms used with the Ukrainian troops during anti-government demonstrations in France and Germany over 2023-2024. Not to mention that terrorists could also exploit this weaponry for their criminal purposes. And, of course, the sponsors of the Bandera regime in Kyiv should give a thought that the arms that they're supplying to Ukraine could be used against them far away from Ukraine, especially in the context of the ongoing debate about continuing Western military aid to the gang of Zelensky. These issues should be touched upon. It is vital for taxpayers in Western countries to understand that, at the behest of their own elites, they're not only financing the continuation of bloodshed in Ukraine, but they're also planting a time bomb in their own home. But there is no doubt that this mine will go off. The thriving corruption at the top of the Kyiv junta, combined with the principle that there is no bad mean for war, fully excludes any kind of control on using this military aid by the West. And perhaps in the future, it could appear for someone who would like to destabilize the situation. And of course, there was a great statement on July 9th, the president of Poland, whose mandate is running out of time. He gave an extensive commentary to the telecompany RMF24 that he's willing to believe the words of Zelensky, who knew nothing about the Volhynia bloodshed, because supposedly those lessons were not taught in the Soviet school. But just a little bit of advice to the Polish president and to others that perhaps they could talk about something else with Zelensky, about math or literature, and they would understand that maths or literature were not taught in that school, or supposedly he did not learn those lessons. We've already published the extensive commentary on our website under the anti-fake title. It's hard to say exactly what Zelensky has learned at school, but the facts are clear. He started following the ideas of Nazism. And unlike him, we very well understand Volhynia bloodshed, and we can recall the facts. This is the murder of Ukrainian nationalists in 1943, 1944 in the west of Ukraine. About hundreds of thousands of civilian Soviet citizens. More of them were Poles, but also Russians, Belarus, Jews, and representatives of other nations of Soviet Union, as well as Ukrainians. And victims of those tragedy should not be divided based on the ethnic principles. All of them are citizens of the USSR who fell at the hands of Hitler's helpers, who were targeting representatives of a special nationality. And this hateful ideology is now followed by the current Ukrainian leaderships. Are they really Ukrainian? They're more of paper dolls. And Polish elites, including the president, Duda, over many years did nothing to prevent the growth of nationalist moods in Ukraine, fully betraying the memory of their own ancestors who were killed by Banderites in the years of war. And Warsaw was blindly following the path of the collective West, fully forgetting their own history or trying to use it in their manipulation, where they remember it when it helps them. And today's Nazis in Ukraine was raised by the West with its Russophobic ideology, who came to power in 2014 after the coup d'etat, and the Polish leadership took part in it. And it was the West who did everything to instigate war and to magnify the suffering of Ukrainians after the act of Zelensky's band. Russia always stood firm against the changing of history, and Russia's line on preserving the historic truth, as well as investigation of the crimes of Hitler's helpers, remains the same. We have no use of making up childish excuses that supposedly someone had no idea about the crimes of Banderites. And it's unlikely that in the west of Ukraine, as he said, that a grandpa bragged to his granddaughters how he killed his neighbors and killed their children, because those kinds of murderers were persecuted in Russia and the USSR. It's only in Canada that they're glorified and they're giving a standing ovation. But it's Ukraine who is now being supplied with arms and money from the Poland. They're the ones glorifying this kind of behavior. And it's all towards the rebirth of Nazism, supposedly, that they're excusing by the supposed fact that it wasn't taught in Soviet schools. No, it was in fact taught in Soviet schools. And we will make sure to publish in the text version of this briefing what we are doing as anti-fake. We're adding links to historical facts, to books of history, to works of historians that were published during the Soviet years. On the situation in Moldova, we're closely following the development of situation, where authorities continue to impose the idea of the so-called European integration to Moldovans under the pretext that it will supposedly save the Republic from the alleged threat from Russia, as they claim. On July 4th this year, in Chisinau, the first Moldova-European Union summit took place, which, according to the organizers' idea, was supposed to look like a historic, fateful event, symbolizing the irreversibility of the process of rapprochement between Moldova and the European Union. In reality, this PR act turned out to be pale and insubstantial. The official part lasted less than 2 hours because there was barely anything to discuss. The few guests from Brussels did not bring any breakthrough solutions, therefore they had to limit themselves to public praise and the adoption of a joint declaration about so-called commitments and aspirations and some supposed threats from the Kremlin. But at the same time, the largest section of the declaration is devoted to bilateral cooperation in the field of security and defense. This is yet another very eloquent confirmation of what we have repeatedly drawn attention to. The West is doing everything they can to turn Moldova into a NATO military bridgehead for possible confrontation with Russia, and they're doing it with willing full assistance of official Chisinau, which is systematically pursuing a course of dismantling the neutral status of their country. Although, what kind of country is it? Moldova, if they're citizens of Romania, and they're being forced to rename their own language into Romanian, to turn Moldovans into Romanians. Let me remind you of some facts that the neutral status is enshrined in the Constitution. On July 10th this year, the Moldovan Parliament ratified the intergovernmental agreement with Germany on the program of assistance in equipping foreign armed forces and secondment of the Bundeswehr Advisory Group to the Republic, signed by the heads of the defense departments of the two countries in May. How exactly will this contribute to any kind of success in education, to European integration of Moldova in the European Union, which Chisinau is advertising to their citizens? Because European Union is first and foremost economy. So all of which I've mentioned, all these agreements between the defense ministries of two countries, how exactly will they contribute to the economic development? They will not. It's nothing but lies. On July 11 this year, it was announced that Denmark will allocate about $8 million over 4 years to once again strengthen Moldova's defense capacity.
Moldova didn't receive any funds for its needs in agriculture. Everything goes to militarization of this country for the sake of NATO. At the same time, joint military trainings are being conducted for the UN purposes. In 2024, they conducted totally at the territory in Moldova, together with the participation of Moldova, they conducted 30 trainings. Why do they do all this? The answer is obvious. They are preparing Republic to be the next Ukraine. On July 13, Moldova media informed on the 4 officials of Moldova who died under Kherson. According to data published in military people were sent to the Ukrainian forces to get the experience of the front line. This is the experience that they received. The authorities continue an open fight with the opposition politicians. 10th of July, the Court of Moldova decided to arrest the head of Gagauzia region Yevgenia Gatsul, she received the arrest for 30 days. It was prolonged to 30 days until 12th of August, 11th of July. The Office of Moldova required to sentence Marina Tauber for 13 years of imprisonment. This is the requirement that they gave. All this is forcing Moldova to join European standards. If you think that this is to develop science, education, or industry, of course it is not. It is against national interests and their own history. Officially, Chisinau is trying to distract the attention of its people from social and economic problems, because they do not have time for the problems of Moldova. They do not have time to develop their science, their culture, their art. They have a different task from Brussels. They are tasked to join their country with NATO to act against Russia from 5 to 27 July on the central square of Moldova. An installation was placed with the name, as it said, State Terror in Soviet Moldova, Scale Victims and Perpetrators. In Moldova, the experts, independent experts, name this installation as something that has nothing to do with the real history of the country. The policy of aggressive pro-Western propaganda in the Republic has led to an opposite effect. According to the recent public opinion polls, 60% of respondents believe that Moldova is moving in the wrong direction. 77% think that the national interests of the country are best served by balanced relations with both Russia and Europeans, and 78% support maintaining the Republic's permanent neutrality. The anti-people practices of Brussels do not find support among the friendly people of Moldova, and evidently they will never do so. Now let us look at the real European standards that are being introduced in the territory of Moldova. We regret to inform about the plans of Moldova to limit the constitutional right of thousands of people in Moldova who live in Russia and who want to participate in the election of their parliament. I will remind you the right for participation in voting is a fundamental right of each citizen of a democratic country. Last year's explanation of Chisinau about the threats of security in the territory of Russia were not supported by anything. The entire world saw that Russia has a very good experience in organizing elections. Tens of states guarantee the security of the Commission of the Observers. Russia, for tens of years, ensures security of the voting of other people in its country. Our law enforcement agencies protect greatly our people in accordance with international standards. And now we can see 20,000 preliminary registration polls of the citizens of Moldova and Russia. The population of the diaspora is more than 300,000 people. And now we can see 20,000 people pre-registered, people from Moldova who want to vote on the elections of 28th of September. If Chisinau will once again limit their possibility and will only leave 2 points of voting, then a lot of people will lose their right for voting, and they it is better say that their right will be stolen. The amount of people wishing to vote is growing. There is a need to open more polls abroad, including in Russian Federation. All the legal basis for the creation of these places are in place, and we confirm that the organizational or legal barriers to open election polls, election points in the territory of Russia do not exist. The Russian party is ready to provide all the necessary conditions and is ready to work with Moldova authorities to promptly resolve any kind of issues, including technical ones. Even the law enforcement agencies in Moldova, coordinating with the United States and other countries, recognize the right of the Russian Federation to open the election points in its country. The refusal to open it this year, to open additional points, is not an issue of security, and it's not an issue of logistics. It's a conscious politics of the ruling party of Moldova and in the first place, of the president of that country, directed to exclude the part of votes of the country, taking into account political position of this part. The requests that we received to ensure the right of people, we need to open at least 9 or better 10 election points in key cities of Russia. And it's obvious, just look at the previous elections, the demand and the Moldova norms were all observed. We call on the authorities of Moldova to conduct work in accordance with their own laws and ensure the rights of their own people and open points in Russia and guarantee their transparent and good work. British authorities continue to use the methods of threat against the media. On the 11th of July, local police stopped and talked to an RT representative in Britain. He was in the country to see his parents under the pretext of being part of the terrorist groups. He was tortured to recognize that his employer makes him place unfair information that does not coincide with his own view. The journalist was taking all his belongings, his laptop and mobile phone, and however, they couldn't detain him for more time, and he was released. At the same time, he had to leave the country. The acts of the special services of Great Britain can be qualified as voluntary actions. And this demonstrates that these acts demonstrate to threaten certain groups of journalists that face with this detainment and serve to demoralize all who not agree with the current course of the Great Britain. These repressive measures applied by the authorities of Great Britain are used not only in Great Britain but abroad. This incident is a testimony of the transition of Ukrainian policy state with the regime of zero tolerance to alternative points of view and total censorship. Important tragic celebration, 11th of July, 30 years to the terrible events in Srebrenica that happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina from a conflict in 1990-1995. We are convinced of the importance of honoring the memory of all innocent victims of that conflict, taking into account the particular sensitivity of this issue for the people living in Bosnia and Herzegovina and neighboring countries, as has been repeatedly stated on various platforms. We consider the approach of certain political and clerical circles supported by the collective West to entrench a biased, one-sided and dangerous interpretation of the 1995 events to be counterproductive and harmful to the processes of reconciliation. We consider that these attempts to demonize the Serbian people are unacceptable. In this context, the establishment of July 11 as an International Day of Remembrance for the genocide in Srebrenica, endorsed by an overtly anti-Serbian resolution of the UN General Assembly, caused regret and concern. This is yet another irresponsible attempt by forces interested in aggressively pursuing their geopolitical goals to exacerbate existing disagreements and increase the conflict potential in the regime. We reiterate that Russia consistently advocates for an objective investigation of unlawful acts committed in the Balkans against all ethnic groups, including Bosniaks, Serbs, and Croats, to ensure that the guilty, regardless of their national or religious affiliation, receive deserved punishment. And a good date. 50 years ago, on 15 July 1975, the entire world was watching, and it was really so, the entire world was watching the flight of Soyuz Apollo. The historic handshake at the orbit was the demonstration that despite all the differences in politics, the desire to cooperate in space can lead to real breakthrough results. The foundations of interaction laid by Soyuz and Apollo were reflected in other major, now multinational projects. The International Space Station, for example, which has been successfully operating for over a quarter of a century. Russia, as a pioneer in space exploration, continues the proud traditions of its space industry and is committed to constructive engagement with all stakeholders in space activities. We thus create a good basis for equal and mutual beneficial cooperation without artificial separation, creation of alliances, or one-sided unilateral standards. A key prerequisite for implementing such international projects is the preservation of space for peaceful purposes. Russia consistently advocates for the prevention of an arms race in outer space and the prevention of its transformation into a sphere of armed confrontation. In this context, it is vital to unite international efforts to unite negotiations for the development of an international legally binding instrument prohibiting the placement of any type of weapons in space, to create a document, legally binding document to prohibit this race to place any type of weapons, to use force, threat, or force against space objects or through them. We consider that the basis for this instrument were presented on the conference on disarmament. It was a Russian-Chinese project of the specialized agreement and the report of the group of government experts on this format. A great contribution to create favorable conditions for cooperation in space was seen by the initiative launched by Russia. It was an international initiative or political commitment to not be the first to place weapons in space. The participants of this agreement are 37 countries. The demonstration of the film, the power of attraction, was shown recently. The junction of two spaceships in Spain was shown in this film. I'm not going to go into details. You can, and I strongly recommend you to do so, to see this film on Thursday at 12 o'clock at night, at midnight, on the first channel in Russia. Yesterday, at the inauguration of the film, the representatives were present, including the heroes 2 times Vladimir Dzinibekov. The film is based on the memories and the personal interviews of to those cosmonauts who unfortunately are not with us anymore, and those who made this handshake. On the 8th of July, in the Republic of Serbia, an inauguration of the memorial to Churkin took place. A Russian diplomat, permanent representative of the Russian Federation at the United Nations from 2006 to 2017. The bust was installed by the orders of the leadership of the Republic of Serbia in recognition of the gratitude of the Serb people in Bosnia and Herzegovina for the Russian veto in the UN Security Council in 2015 against the British resolution aimed at imposing collective responsibility for war crimes during the Bosnian conflict that we just discussed. And the West wanted to impose a responsibility on Bosnian Serbs solely. The event was timed with the 10th anniversary of Russia's vote in the Security Council, and was attended by the wife, not widow, but wife of Mr. Turkin, representatives of Serbia and Bosnia, and Republican authorities. The Sergei Lavrov gave a welcoming address, and it was widely covered by local and international media. We perceive this event as a tribute to the long-standing efforts of Turkey in support of international law and protection of the constitutional powers of the two entities and the three state-forming peoples in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we also see this as a real and sincere love to this person. The 30 years of Dayton Peace Agreement, which was largely made possible by Vitaly Ivanovic's contribution. This is a symbolic and very dear initiative to us that reflects a unified approach with the people of the Republic of Serbia in advancing a positive agenda fostering truth, trust, peace, and stability in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in the entire region. We express our gratitude to the creator of the concept and sponsor of the monumental project, academician of the Russian Academy of Arts, Aydin Zeynalov. 16 July 1945, in New Mexico, the Americans conducted, as you remember, the first test of the nuclear weapon, which meant the transition of atom to the military rails. The United wanted to get a new type of weapon to ensure their hegemony and dictate to other people their rules, and that is why they decided to choose the date of opening of the Potsdam Conference, where the American President Truman tried to use this fact to create pressure on Russia. However, this was not enough for the U.S. leadership. On August 6 to 9 of the same 1945, the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were subject to nuclear bombings. The use of nuclear weapons against the civilian population was senseless from a military standpoint and effectively represented a cruel means of testing a new type of weapon in real conditions. Thus, we note this date, and we state that the responsibility for the militarization of atomic energy lies entirely with the United States. And what is being discussed today, we mentioned this repeatedly, 17th of July, but it happened 80 years ago in 1945 in Potsdam. In Zetzelenhof, the conference started to work of three states, the USSR, USA, and Great Britain. Potsdam Conference was a concluding event in a series of meetings among the big three leaders and had decisive political significance for the fate of post-war Europe and the world. The allies of the anti-coalition aimed to prevent a recurrence of aggression from Germany, establish peace and security on the European continent, and ensure the determination of fair post-war borders, reuniting independence, sovereignty to the oppressed countries and peoples, granting them the right to determine their own future. To achieve these objectives, an agreement was reached on the basic principles of the activities of the Allied Control Council in Germany, which served as the supreme governing body of the victorious powers, overseeing the exercise of supreme authority in Germany by representatives from the USSR, the USA, the United Kingdom, and France. Based on the decisions of the Yalta Conference and proposals prepared by the European Advisory Commission, fundamental approaches regarding Germany were agreed upon, which included denazification, demilitarization, democratization, and decentralization, along with the complete disarmament of the country in the dissolution of its armed forces, including the SS, SD, and Gestapo.
According to the resolution, which was adopted by the Allied forces back at the Moscow Conference in 1943, a decision was made to legally persecute the main German criminals by the International Military Tribunal. There were separate agreements on the reparation, which was adopted by the Council of Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the USSR, of USA, Great Britain, France, and China, where they prepared agreements with former Hitler satellites, Italy, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Finland. And it was especially important for them to settle the territorial issues. They decided upon the new Polish-German border and Königsberg, which is since 1946 Kaliningrad, which was handed over to Soviet Union, and the Soviet leadership has confirmed its obligations on participating in war against Japan. Potsdam Conference was a clear example of constructive cooperation between great powers, which helped defeat fascism and could guarantee post-war peace and security. It demonstrated the ability to peacefully settle different issues through negotiations, despite ideological differences, and agreements reached by the leaderships of three powers were enshrined in the protocol of the conference on August 1st, 1945, and on July 17th this year, within the series of history of Russian diplomacy, at the initiative of the Russian Foreign Ministry. They want to use the new sign of post-payment dedicated to the 80th anniversary of the Berlin Potsdam Conference of 1945. And we also haven't announced, as you know, since 2019, we have a festival, Strong Figures. And as you know, it's quite a reputable platform for humanitarian cooperation through sport, and different state representatives, Olympic champions, employees of diplomatic missions participate in it. And the main purpose of the festival is the development of international cooperation in different areas of sport. In 2024, the event was attended by representatives of 32 friendly states, including military attachés from 23 countries. In 2025, there will be quite a few significant events. Quite soon, on July 19th in Moscow region in the Moscow Country Club, there will be a golf tournament between Russia and the international team. We already have a confirmed participation of 15 friendly states, including India, Indonesia, South Africa, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Morocco, Ghana, Uzbekistan, and others. There will also be a roundtable on issues of international sport cooperation. And on September 19th, there will be an international chess tournament among diplomatic employees in the Chess Museum on Gogolevsky Boulevard. And in November, there will be a tag rugby with the participation of foreign teams that will be covered by media. Now I'm ready to answer your question. Is the International Life magazine with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Despite the well-known social and economical issues in the EU member states, including the growing state debt, the European Commission is following the line of massive financial support to Kyiv. And this was, among other things, discussed during the conference in Rome that you've mentioned. And yet Brussels is turning a blind eye to the rampant level of corruption in this country. So according to you, which is really the main purpose of the European Union, you see, I've already commented on all this money that is being sent from one pocket to another, along with shaking the money from different sources. Let me recall that from July 8th to 9th, Italian capital hosted a conference on restoration of Ukraine, which just showed new billion financial obligations of the European Union toward the Kyiv regime, according to the head of European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Brussels is ready to cover about 84% of demands of Ukraine on foreign financing and is ready to continue helping them in the upcoming years. They also do not limit out the option where in 2028-2034 there will be new targeted financing for Kyiv amounting to 100 billion euros. Where is this altruism coming from? I believe that you're well aware where to seek an answer to that question, you have to find who's reaping benefits from it. And this unprecedented speculative operation on finance in Kyiv regime is beneficial for all those involved, for international financial corporations, for Western investors who are catching at low prices Ukrainian shares, especially as well as the Western military industry complex, who, thanks to the prolonging of the Ukrainian conflicts, got a chance of a second whiff. And finally, last but not least, to many corruptioners in Brussels, and not just in Brussels. So who exactly is losing from it? Well, it's obvious. First and foremost, the Ukrainian citizens who are being killed, who are being robbed out in the open. Everyone is seeing it, but they're not in the power to do anything. It's also not beneficial to the population of those countries, who go to work every day, who produce a lot, who sell a lot, and they're not reaping any benefits from it, but nobody is asking what they think. They're just being given a new bill to finance and pay new crazy ideas of Ursula von der Leyen. Perhaps they should give it a thought, but perhaps they're not allowed to give it a thought. But first of all, victims of those are the ordinary Ukrainians. Those who are still alive, they're being subjected to the lifelong debt, not just for the 5 years, but for dozens of years. And they're being used as illegal workforce who not only get their economic benefits ripped away from them, but they lose any kind of independence. At the aforementioned conference in Rome, the European Commissioner on the expansion of the EU, Slovenian Marta Kos, said that the goal of benefits of Brussels on aiding Ukraine is to help Ukraine become a European nation. What point of view did she pursue with this? Geographically, Ukraine has always been in Europe. Politically, it gained its sovereignty in the 1990s and also positioned itself and developed as a European state. Culturally, religiously, it was inextricably linked with the European civilization. So under the guise of assistance to Ukraine, of helping Ukraine become a European nation, they're actually trying to strip its identity from Ukraine. In other words, in order for Ukraine to pay all its debts to the European Union, they not only will have to lose their last bits of clothing, but they will also have to work on their own European identity, because later they will have to be taught on who they have to be in order to pay off everything that they're being given right now. I believe that's what they're trying to do here. Thank you very much. And another question, if you allow. Last Saturday, on July 12th, heads of the working group on coordinating the aid of Ukraine under the Ministry of Defense of Germany, Christian Freuding, stated that the Ukrainian armed forces could, before the end of July, get first long-range systems within the packet of German-Ukrainian military cooperation. How could you comment on this information and assess the actions of the German authorities? It's interesting how quickly they forgot about democracy and human rights that they claim to care for so much, how little they actually care for who these arms will be used against. They don't think it's necessary to count the civilian losses. They no longer care for what happens to children. Amazing, isn't it? We've already stated and mentioned how the efforts of the official Berlin are trying to hide. They are willing to participate in perpetrating strikes in Russia by doing it through Ukrainians, by shifting the blame to them. And the defeat of fascists in 1945 has, as it seems, escaped their minds. And this aggressive approach to our country was blatantly, openly confirmed by the Ministry of Defense, Pistorius, who stated on the readiness of German troops, just think about it, to kill Russian soldiers if there is an attack on one of the NATO members. They've gone absolutely wild. Which NATO member has Russia ever tried or intended to attack? It was NATO members in their previous state, in their previous formation, who always attacked our country. And on our country, we've stated before that we have no intention, we have never had any intention to attack NATO countries. It was Germany who attacked us in 1941, and experts rightfully called attention to practical identification of the rhetorics of the aforementioned person with the propaganda statements of the Hitler's Germany, who used that to excuse their militarized rhetoric. As for the Germans' aid in long-range systems of Ukraine, they could try it to hide their plans on the military-industrial complex of localization of the Taurus rockets that, for now, they refuse to supply to Ukrainian armed forces. But that's if we believe their words. But by the end of the year, they will no longer be able to hide it, because as soon as the Russian anti-air missile systems strike down the rockets, we will be able to identify who those rockets belong to. And there is not a single doubt that using long-range systems without the direct involvement of military specialists of the countries who produce those systems. And here we mean the satellite intelligence data from NATO, including their missions. Without it, it would be impossible. So the military officials of Germany would be directly involved in planning and perpetrating attacks against Russia when the aforementioned Tauruses and their modifications are used. In November 2024, if you remember, the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, clearly stated our position on the decision of the Western states to greenlight Kyiv on using the long-range strikes on the territory of Russia. This position has not changed. We believe we have the right to use our arms against the military objects of those countries who dare to use their arms against Russia. In the case of further escalation of the conflict, we will respond decisively in a mirror-like fashion. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is the Zvezda channel with us? Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We would like to get your opinion. What is the ministry's position on the offer of the Lvov's mayor to exchange the bodies of dead Russian soldiers for the bodies of the Ukrainian armed forces? I will not quote the full statement that's been made. The mayor of Lvov said that, Mr. Sadovoy. I will add the full quote in the text version of the briefing, but you have stated it. I would like to talk about something else. What is the Hall of Fame that they're trying to exhumate? It's not just the burial site of Soviet soldiers who participated in the liberation of Lvov in 1944. It is also the burial sites of more than 25,000 militants during the First World War, and later died from wounds in battlefield. I would like to remind the mayor of Lvov that at the opening of that memorial in 1915, more than 15,000 residents of Lvov came to witness it. I wonder how many residents came to see the barbaric actions perpetrated by the authorities. Actually, they should come and see what it has turned into. The acts committed by the Kyiv regime in Lvov, it's not just barbaric. These are crimes against humanity. It's the final stage of moral degradation of the Nazi regime, who is now paying with the bones of those who liberated Ukraine from the fascists. And the fact that he proposed to include the remains of 350,000 liberators, including Mr. Kuznetsov and Mr. Putin. It's not just policy, it's not just politics. It's simply inhumane, or it's the dirtiest possible manner of working. What's next? They will open up the graves based on the nationality. They will dig out bones and put them in different piles, proposing to take them away because the last names have "ov" at the end of them. What's next? Lvov's authorities cynically state on the observations of the specialists, but facts tell a different story. The remains were removed with excavators. Their remains, their ashes, were mixed with dirt. They left the burial sites in ruins. The eternal flame was sent to the Museum of the Territory of Terror. So they're basically saying that Soviet liberators are the same as Nazis. So the offer to exchange the remains of liberators, it's not the negotiations. It's nothing but the desiccation. Soldiers who laid their lives to liberate Lvov. In 1944, have turned into a bargaining chip. I'd like to recall to the Lvov's authorities that it was their ancestors who fought alongside that army. And now their descendants, ungrateful descendants, are stomping on the burial sites of their own grandparents. And what if their relatives died in other cities and it was Lvov, and that's what was done to them? What exactly would they think? Would that also be okay? And of course, especially cynic is the fate of the intelligence officer Kuznetsov. His burial site was desiccated in many occasions, and his relatives repeatedly begged for him to be reburied in Russia, and Kyiv repeatedly denied that request. And back then they already requested the exchange of prisoners of war. Kyiv regime is ready to destroy the memory of their own ancestors in order to do something good for their curators. I don't even know what to call it. It really is what they show the worst monsters and thrillers. If you have no further questions, is Ria News with us?
РИА Новости. Hello. We have one question for today. It's a big question. Association of Journalists, BRICS journalists, included in the sanctions list of the EU, sent to Guterres and the Director General of UNESCO to blame these steps and stop threatening to journalists. What do you think? Will these acts help in resolving this issue, and what kind of support can be provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia? Similar reports have become an important
формирование институтов, я имею в виду международных структур.
Similar requests have been quite often about the facts of violation of the professional rights of the workers in the media area. And there is only one condition. These international structures should act in an unbiased manner. And once receiving the signal from the non-governmental structures, they could have a clear picture, but they have their own picture. And and they should use these data and assist the journalists. However, what they do now is that they pretend that it's not in their competence and that they do not have the information. This is not the first open letter to the Association of Authorities, as Azule, Director General of UNESCO, in this year, the similar letter was sent to protect the journalists from Ukrainian forces. You know well that Azule is not responding to similar requests. It doesn't matter if the request goes from the governmental or non-governmental structures, and no actions are taken, even though it's her mandate, her work, her responsibilities. There should be a certain structure to receive the information, even though they say that they rely on the data from governmental or non-governmental structures. And in this case, if they have a non-governmental, an information from non-governmental structure, they do not use it either. As for the European Union, the reaction followed. In July, they applied their illegal, immoral sanctions against the Association of Journalists, and we responded that Brussels openly, shamelessly tries to suppress the voices of those who show lack of legality and real facts, and those who should have acted immediately, give a qualified reaction to similar actions, show that it goes against the international rights and violates the rights of journalists. They keep silence. Sometimes they give replies that do not mean anything, but mostly they just ignore. In the leadership of these international organizations, they respond rapidly and eagerly to the information received from non-governmental organizations, received from the West. And for this, they do not need time to check the facts or any other efforts to analyze the information. They rely immediately on the data of the West in their discourses. And everything, what they say is anti-Russian. They just do not take into account information that is not in accordance with the main information from the West, the information on freedom of expression connected with the principles of the equality of the approaches. And we will continue our work consistently, trying to receive a fair, transparent work from these structures. We will fight with this biased approach and the incompetence of the authorities, and we'll try to do that. The information that you require will be responded. Thank you. Do we have after E with us? Yes. Hello, Yaroslav Kondratov. Recently, the president of the European Council and the head of European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said that they are ready, that the EU is ready to invest in Armenia at least 2.5 billion euros, as they said, for stability and inclusion of it in the regional and economic initiatives. we could say that it's nonsense. Could you comment on that? Probably here they're talking about the money that Brussels promised in multiple occasions. You're talking about Armenia, right? So they promised this money to Yerevan, to the people of Yerevan, and how they apply this promises. We should ask Yerevan if they received this money. We are not going to look into their pocket. This is about their relations with the European institutes. But I think that even in today's briefing, it's obvious that this is something usual, that the European Commission, that NATO promise something generously and then under the pretext of financial problems control the processes receiving benefits only for themselves. Also, they take into they sum up and take the total amount of the resources that they allocate more than once, and even in this case they find themselves in a difficult situation when they cannot resolve what they started. The Western story about the finances, there is another scheme when they promise something and do not give in the end, saying that the conditions do not apply or that the requirements have not been observed. This is something that Brussels does often, and the European Union tries to stimulate the interest of its foreign partners to receive the funds from the EU. And the methods that they use is to introduce the products in the European money, give credit. A lot has been said about this in books, and not only in books, the grants from the European Union that they give to the society under the pretext of democracy, that has nothing to do in this matter. The assistance have long become not the idea for development, but a leverage to control other countries in internal affairs and in foreign affairs. It's an interference in internal affairs. We're convinced that the development of third countries and implementation of different infrastructure projects shall be done based on other things. We should respect the sovereignty, take into account the authenticity, be respectful to economic, political interests of those countries that they intend to help. And of course, this assistance, as they call it, shall not become an instrument of threat to other countries, artificial instability, or hampering the development of the of other countries. Formats that they try to employ in Yerevan, for example, using the Black Sea strategy, is aimed at these very facts that I enumerated. Thank you very much. Thank you. Open TV, are you with us? Yes, Afanasy Yerinos, Open TV. There are a lot of publications in European media where they say that migrants and refugees from Libya through sea in our country has increased, and it's a big problem in Crete, for example. And all this is a hybrid war from Russia to destabilize European Union. And for this, Russian militaries are used that remained in Libya or worked there. The military campaigns existing or that existed in Czechia, in Germany. I would like to hear your opinion, your comments, and if you have understanding of what is planned, what Russia plans, and what do they do in Libya. I have a question to specify. Do they say in these publications that Russia killed Gaddafi? Of course, now we all know who killed Gaddafi. You know this because, first, you are an educated person, and secondly, you are an independent journalist, and third, you are a test. You saw with your own eyes the events. I would like to assure you that the younger generation of 20-something years, they do not know that they can be told any story. I assure you that 5-7 years ago, these conferences that took place annually in a room where they discussed the problems of Libya and the migration problems, nobody could say that the problems of migration had to do something with Russia in Italy, in Greece. They all knew who to blame. Those who destroyed statehood of the sea states of the Northern Africa, of the Middle East, those who provoked the Arab Spring, those who killed and destroyed the authorities legally elected, those who made chaos in turn in those countries, destroyed the sovereignty of those countries. And now you can see what they say. This is nonsense. We really saw as the media publish such things. It's not the first time they do this. It's a systematic work to implant fake information and implant the mentality and philosophy that this is something where Russia is to blame. It's absurd, but only we can understand this, and for other readers, not prepared readers, this is a normal information. What is the reason of all this crisis? The first crisis was initiated by the collective West and the leadership of the United States of America that introduced NATO and used NATO for this Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan. We're convinced that the flows of migrants is a follow-up of irresponsible acts of interference in the internal affairs of other countries, forced replacement of the authorities in the countries, and those who participated in these interferences in the opening of the conflicts should bear the main responsibility for the consequences. The consequences, one of the main consequences, one of the most serious consequences is a mass migration of refugees, illegal refugees, of course, because there is no possibility to stop them, to give them some legal ways of crossing the border. They just run from the terror. They run for the promised, or something that they were promised, because they supported the change of power in their country first. They believed in democracy and democratic rules, and now they started to escape from to save their lives with those who promised the democracy. So there are roots who make them change the country, and to resolve this problem, to stop the migration, we need to find the root cause, not to find some hidden hybrid operations. We need to help social and economic development, state building, fight with terrorism in those states where the West conducted these experiments. Direct or indirect, Russia is supporting the activization and coordination of efforts of the international community to find political solution of the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, in the north of Africa. It is necessary to develop multilateral cooperation at the central coordination role of the United Nations for effective resolution of problems related to mass movement of migrants and refugees. We need to see the root causes and be fair, speak fairly on them, not to invent information and information campaign to blame Russia in something that in some other crimes. If there is no questions, we can go on. Известия, are you with us? Hello, Maria Vladimirovna. Известия on
Приднестровской Молдавской Республики.
On Moldova Republic, Andrei Safonov. The NATO developed plan of attacking the republic. However, according to him, the West won't implement this plan because the West has another scenario to encircle and make them
Есть ли у России планы по поддержке Приднестровья?
give up. Does Russia have plans to improve the situation in Transnistria or to do something with the threat from the NATO? The words that you cited of the Transnistria deputy person, it was a information of the services of Russia, and we mentioned in multiple occasions the forced militarization of Moldova, what NATO does, playing the central role in these actions. We want to believe that. I would like to underline, we want to believe the settlement by peaceful means in Chisinau, but the facts show a different reality. They show growing of the possibility for forced resolution of the Transnistria problem. At the same time, there is a course on economic strangulation that is obvious in the process of Transnistria settlement. It is necessary to ensure peace and security, and this is what the Russian peacekeepers do in the region. And soon we are celebrating the next anniversary of their entry in the region for the peaceful purposes. In Moscow, we are following closely the situation around Transnistria, and we are ready to react to any, including the most unfavorable situation. I would like to give a full reference when you cite it to see the links. Thank you very much.
Is Ukraine.ru with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova, Anna Cherkasova, Ukraine.ru. If you allow, I have two questions. The first one, as many experts believe the statement of Donald Trump on July 14th, a practically green light of the strengthening of the terrorist action of Kyiv regime on Russian territory. And you repeatedly stated that this already has been before, and you've mentioned it today. But now Zelensky's hands are untied. What do you think about it? And what does Russia have to say to that? You see, Zelensky's hands are always reaching for more money. So whether they're tied or not, as soon as there's money involved, and just like Houdini's act or Copperfield, his hands will be untied. He has some kind of instinct for that. I would like to once again draw your attention to the comments of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, to the representatives of the administration of the President, when it comes to the statement of the Donald Trump. It appears that a Kyiv regime systematically sees the decisions of the collective West as a signal to continuing war and as a refusal for any peaceful actions or negotiations. And more arms could provoke escalation of criminal terrorist acts. And we've already mentioned how the arms supply to Ukraine just disappears from the Ukrainian territory. And these terrorist acts are perpetrated by Ukrainian armed forces, by the nationalist organizations, by the terrorist organizations who participate in the conflict on the side of the Kyiv regime and the conflict. And of course, we've repeatedly drawn attention to the terrorist nature of the Kyiv regime. And basically every day we state facts, confirmed facts. We bring attention to the punishment received by those who perpetrate terrorist acts. And more than that, Kyiv regime is not hiding the fact that they're committing terrorist crimes. They're not feeling any kind of shame of it. They're proud of it. And they're proud that they're using Western arms when committing those acts against the objects of civilian infrastructure, against civilians, against women and children, against journalists, state and political figures, against the social employees, those who provide assistance, doctors, emergency services employees. So the defeat that is appearing closer and closer against the backdrop of these terrorist acts, they have more and more desire to perpetrate more terror. It keeps growing. And against this backdrop, the West is supplying more and more arms, money. So what about the statements of the West about organizing the negotiations table and providing a seat at that table for the EU as well? Have they forgotten all about it? What about the human rights that they've cried about for decades? And the language of ultimatums, of demands is not acceptable. We will take any necessary steps to ensure security in our country and protect the interests of our country. Against this backdrop, the relevance of the goals of the special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine only grows. Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. If you allow another question. Yes, of course. Despite the fact that in the relations between Russia and Germany, there has always been some tension. Until 2022, Germany has been the closest European state for us. And after the Cold War, Germany and Russia have tried to develop their multipolar partnership. But right now, Berlin is the most active European arms supplier in Ukraine. And Pistorius is calling to eradicate Russians. Are there any perspectives to restore relations between Russia and Germany, and what is necessary for them? Excuse me, could you repeat? Are there any perspective for the restoration of relations between Russia and Germany, and what is necessary for that? You see, it's weird to ask this question as if we're to blame for the fact that there are such people among German politicians. It's not on us. We've done everything, and we have historically done everything that the relations with peaceful, flourishing Germany would develop in a positive key. And we have actually forgiven something that neither a human being or people can forgive. We have forgiven tens of millions of killed citizens. We have forgiven them torturing our country, torturing our peoples. We have forgiven burned down cities and villages, destroyed museums. We have forgiven tortures of women and children. We have forgiven them their attitude towards us, not just as third-rate people, but someone who have no right to life. We have truly forgiven everything. We've never forgotten. And that's why we preserve memorials. That's why we continue to produce movies. We learn history. We haven't forgotten, but we have forgiven. Once again, we have extended the hand of friendship, of mutual cooperation, respect. We've shown how, by forgiving, you can propose normal, mutually beneficial, mutually respectful cooperation. We have proposed so many projects. We've basically If you need historical resources, then let's cooperate and explore peacefully what we have so that it's mutually beneficial. So it doesn't lead to you losing your last beats of humanity. We've directly participated to ensure that these resources are supplied to them on mutually beneficial conditions, of course, but also to preserve your human nature. And what do we get? We get exactly what we're seeing right now. But the most terrifying thing is what Germany got out of it. Full amnesia of their own mistakes, of their own wrongdoings. They've neglected to remember of their own modern history as the unification of its country, which wasn't divided, not as a result of someone else's actions, but of their own crimes. They've fully forgotten who played the role of unificator of Germany, that it was our country and our people who was unable to forgive, but still forgave, and then contributed to the unification of Germany. They've managed to betray that, to betray themselves. So when you ask who should do and what, yes, today from official Berlin we hear calls to destroy our statehood, our country, our people as a whole and separately, and all these calls have turned into a mania of those who are in power in Germany. They're trying to erase anything connected to our country, informational, cultural, digital space. German arms are used to fire at Russian territory, at Russian people, at the same people that they're forever indebted to, especially for the fact how many people simply weren't born because of their actions. They're now discussing the launch in Ukraine of the long-range winged rockets, Taurus, use of which requires the participations of specialists, so the direct participation of German specialists, and it's not just undercover participations. Do German civilians understand that when they vote for German politics, what their leadership is pushing them towards? Do they understand that? Supposedly they've spoken against the destruction of any relations with Russia, especially against militarizing against our country. But what next? Then they will say that they were once again lied to. They weren't lied to. 90 years ago, they've already been offered the so-called democratic choice, but which turned out to be a catastrophe. And it wasn't an imminent catastrophe, it was a historical scale of catastrophe. I would like to recall once again that it's clear that those who we've always called the revanchists, but who were hiding in silence under the benches, when they came out, they did not learn any lessons from their own history. Any efforts of the representatives of German authorities to talk to Russia using ultimatums from the position of power, as they believe, are ridiculous, immoral, and they're laughable. Imagine what they thought, to divide victims of the Second World War based on their nationality. Did they attack us based on nationality? Those who deserve to live, those who are meant to be slaves, or those who are meant to be killed immediately? And they were punished for that. But 80 years later, they started to divide victims and heroes of the Second World War. They do reparations to the former people who were in the blockade of Leningrad, but still based on their nationality. I believe that those who are well-read, who are well-educated in Germany, are suffering from the fact that they can sense looming catastrophe of their own. I gave an interview to one of the German journalists, and he said, "When will you save us again?" And I said to him, "When will you start saving yourself?" So if you want to ask questions on the fixing of relationship with Germany, you should ask them that questions. But first of all, they should save themselves from another catastrophe that they've already been through before. And I believe that right now they're on the brink of a catastrophe again. Moving on, is Xinhua with us? Are you with us? Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I have a following question. During the meeting with the Russian Federation, the chairmanship of the Chinese Republic has understated that China and Russia should unite the countries of the global south, promote international order in a more just and rational direction. How does Russian side see the current role of the global south and the system of international relations? What plans does Russia have for the joint promotion of participation of global south countries in bettering the global government? I would like to recall that in the Russian concept of foreign policy, there is a goal of concentrating the efforts on those geographical areas where there are clear perspectives when it comes to expanding mutually beneficial international cooperation. First of all, those are our closest neighbors, other Asian countries, Africa, Latin America, and of course, states of the global south and east. A lot of them are gaining more power in global affairs, are gaining their independent policy based on their national interest. And they assess Russia's action in the international arena through the prism of restoring historical justice. They recognize our input in fighting neo-colonialism towards forming a more balanced world order. We try to build our bilateral relations through lines of CIS, through SCO, ASEAN. We cooperate in BRICS. We've hosted 2 summits, Russia, Africa. You see how actively we cooperate with all of them, and we form infrastructure that is not prone to the pressure of unfriendly states. When it comes to China, I believe that every day we answer such questions at the highest level and at the level of the heads of government and governmental structures during our briefings. But if we talk about this context that you've just mentioned, and we see each other as priority partners on the international arena, approaches of Moscow and Beijing, due to the key issues of international world order and key international issues are either close or the same. Russian-Chinese ties are the main stabilizing factor in international affairs against the backdrop of unilateral measures in international relations. We continue to a restoration of fair multipolar world order based on the South states of global South in order to expand the equal, indivisible security in Eurasia. Russia and China have resulted in great cooperation in the Shanghai Organization of Cooperation. We also strengthen our cooperation with the global South and East states in the UN and G20. And of course, one of them is BRICS. And we try to enhance role of multipolar states. But it's necessary to understand here that BRICS has never positioned itself against other multilateral formats. This organization was not drawn up in order to replace any existing international institutions. On the contrary, BRICS countries advocate for the strengthening of the central role of UN when it comes to following its charter and the international norms. Thank you. Thank you very much. Is the Chinese Media Corporation with us? Yes, good afternoon. We have two questions. On July 14th, Donald Trump stated that if Russia and Ukraine will not come to a peaceful agreement within 50 days, the U.S. will come 100% tax on Russian goods. At the same time, Washington is ready to supply Ukraine the most modern arms. Do you believe that these actions contradict his words about the peaceful resolution of the conflict? What do you believe are the reason for these steps? I'd like to draw your attention to the words of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov. And thirdly, I would like to state that if you know, for many days we have now seen comments from Washington, from the White House, from the State Department. Should we use every day to position what they've said against their previous tweets or previous statements, written or oral ones? Perhaps then we will have no time for work. We will simply compare their words. I believe this is counterproductive and useless to measure with a ruler how far they stray from their own position, from their line of work, and their inner American statements, even on international issues. I believe this is impossible. They have so many statements. Sometimes one may contradict the other. It's simply useless to analyze them. We better analyze and better word our own position. And I believe that position has been clearly phrased. When it comes to Ukraine, we have our aspirations, we have our goals. And we have also always followed the diplomatic line of work. We have strived to use it. If there are new actions of the Westerners, we will respond accordingly. We have always said that we're prepared for that. Back in 2022, now in 2025, of course, something is now still out in the open. They said that they need stable, secure peace. And yet, the next round, they're trying to either avoid, or they haven't directly stated when they will be ready to host it. As for the sanctions that you've referred to, you see, against our country and our international agents, there's now an unprecedented number of sanctions, all kinds of limitations. There are dozens of hundreds of them. I believe there are so many of them that the threat of new sanctions are now viewed as something normal, because the Westerners themselves have come to an impasse, to a dead end, because they understand that there will be responsive measures from us. We will operate based on the situation at hand. And for us, it's nothing new, although for them, they always position it as something new, and it's nothing new. This is their policy, and they're pursuing it. And of course, no one is fully ruling out results of world policy. We see that during the last years, there are schemes and systems that would allow us to restore or to compensate some kind of requirements or demands or disappearing possibilities. We will compensate them in different ways. I believe that you know them all too well, and I don't need to go into detail. So yes, we've learned how to respond to that. Yes, we believe it is illegal. Yes, and no matter what, we don't accept the fact of threats. I don't think I've said anything groundbreaking. I've simply repeated what we've already informed you about.
And the second question, the meeting of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of SCO took place in China. during which they spoke about the general preparation for the summit in Tenzin, and mentioned the declaration of the Union in Tenzin. The work of the minister in Tenzin, the result of the ministerial meeting in Tenzin, it was noted that the meeting opened the decisive steps for the opening, has prepared for the opening of the summit. The meeting of the president of China with the heads of the ministries of foreign affairs of other countries was the most important event. We stated the priorities, and within the presidency of China, about 100 events have been held. In his response, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation reiterated the line of actions on general content of the meeting of the heads of the Union of the Heads of States. The agreement will be continued on the line of national coordinators and specialized institutions. Once again, I would like to highlight that the information presented with the comment of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, is published on the website. We'll provide all the necessary links from the briefing, and we are convinced that the results of the event in Tenzin, we analyze the possibility that it will foster strengthening of the SCO as a system of indivisible security in the region to create a more fair world order. We are convinced that it will give an impetus for the development of the association and bring SCO to a new, as Sergei Lavrov said, to a new level. Thank you very much. Thank you to you. Orator, please. Hello, we have a question on cooperation between Russia and China, as well as threats of Trump to introduce 100 tariffs against Russia and its trade partners. What do you think? Is it possible for these threats to be implemented to introduce the tariffs? Will it affect the cooperation with China and the supply of energy resources to China? What do you think? How stable is the cooperation of Moscow and Peking in view of these threats? Look at the question. You ask if the threat can affect. Well, it is a threat. We heard the threat. Is it the first one? It's not the first one. If these threats or threats of this type are unclear, no, they were articulated quite well. They were well directed, and the threats had their desired effect. And what did they lead to? To nothing. If you are asking about the implementation of these threats, then to comment the events that haven't happened have no sense. The logic of development of the Russia-China relations during the last 10 years has been repeated in on multiple occasions that either Moscow and Beijing consciously made a choice of strategic cooperation for on a long-term basis. If they knew about the threats, Moscow and Beijing, of course they did, and they heard about these threats. They read about these threats as well, but they did their choice, what they consider the most appropriate in these circumstances. More than that, we are adhering to this vector because it's helping to the development of general development of the both states. We have mutual beneficial relations, and it is also good for the countries of the global south, or global and east of the global majority. Collective immunity is shaping actively, I would call it this way, an immunity to different types of threats from our enemies. Also in the political discourse, in the political speeches, Moscow and Beijing, Russia and China created a response to the threats. If you are speaking about oral threats, well, oral response have been given already, shoulder to shoulder. This is how we act in response to these threats. We have a special term for this. We coined a special term. We have to react to the external threats, take decisions, well-balanced decisions, and rely on the ideas of our sovereignty to develop culture, art, and other areas. Trump can speak to himself and response. He can give a response that he considers necessary. The position taken by the leaders after the visit of Xi Jinping to Russia, he expressed support which countries to not interfere the development of partnership of both countries. And this answer was already formulated in the document that we published, and the relations between the two countries avoid any possibility of interference in the internal affairs. Sergei Lavrov visited China and met with Xi Jinping, and it confirmed the closeness of the relations between Russia and China on the international arena, and readiness to use internal force of China and Russia, not only for the interests of our country, but also for the good of the entire humanity. Lenta.ru, are you with us? Yes, hello, Maria Vladimirovna, Lena Bilavarova, Lenta.ru. You have partially replied to our question, but we would like to focus on the following thing. The report for the baptism of Russia on the 15th of July. Zelensky said that this holiday is, I'm citing, a bridge that has 3 pillars, Ukrainians, where they exist now and they will be. What does Russia say on these words? You know, the pillars of this bridge, Zelensky broke them down. He killed and he's continuing to kill his own people. The comparison that he gave is clear, because we can clearly see who hit this fair bridge with these pillars. It was Zelensky himself and his regime, with the support of the Western countries and their allies. This is what I can say about this matter. Thank you very much. Thanks, Newsroom. Maria Vladimirovna, hello. News.ru, Mikhail Rosen. We have 2 questions, if you allow. Zelensky signed a law to suspend the Ottawa Convention for Ukraine on the human mines. What do you think about that? We already commented on that. I will just give you the links. We dwelled on this quite in detail. It was a decision, and this decision was taken. I already gave the comment. And partially, you touched upon the next issue. The head of the ministry, Sergei Lavrov, said that Moscow proposed a 3rd round of Ukraine, but there was no reaction. If there were any signals from the side of Kyiv, and if the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia is expecting anything, I haven't heard anything about the signals. Russia is ready to go to Turkey for the next round of negotiations, and we hope that Kyiv will act in the spirit of the agreements reached, and the negotiation process will continue. Thank you very much. Shall we go on? Baltic News. Yes, hello. Maria Vladimirovna, thank you very much for the possibility to ask a question. I have 2 questions. We know that Estonia allows itself provocative actions near the Russian border. In Srebrenica, not far from St. Petersburg, the training of firearms took place. The rockets we're reaching the distance of 15 kilometers. If the Minister of Foreign Affairs is viewing this as the preparation to close the Baltic Sea for our country. Estonia, it's not the first year that Estonia is acting as an enemy to our country, together with other countries of the Baltic Sea. Tallinn is showing fake news and supports the increase of defense budget and contributes a lot in the construction of the Baltic line of defense. We consider the growing of the military potential of Estonia, including the increase of HIMARS rockets and conducting of training, as a wider and dangerous tendency of militarization of the Baltic region, which have considered as one of the most peaceful regions in the world. Now they are deploying regiments on the western flank, and deploy additional attack means military infrastructure, and conduct training using different types of armament. And the NATO positioned Russia as a threat, as an enemy. Our country, unlike these crazy actions of Baltic countries, is not interested in the militaristic hysteria, but will consider the external threats in accordance with its own national interests. Maria Vladimirovna, thank you very much. The second question: organizers of annual marathon in Vilnius will not recognize the victory of the citizens of Russia and Belarus. What does the Ministry of Foreign Affairs think about this? Well, what can we say about this? It can only be evaluated in one way. If the prizes on the international arena are given on the principle of the nationality, it shows that the country that introduces similar rules and supports them is infected with Nazism and racism. These are all characteristics of the Reich. Al-Maidin, hello. The United States, if the United States are threatening you, and what about the proposal of disarmament of the Lebanon group of Hezbollah? The Lebanon will belong to Syria. What does Russia think about this? Our position stays the same. We support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. I'm sorry. We support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. As for the plans of the Americans, I think we should ask them. I do not have nothing to add to this question. Shall we continue? Big Asia, are you with us? Hello, Maria Vladimirovna. Hello, dear colleagues. Ina Fernandez, Big Asia channel. We have two questions. First, have been covered by you about the sanctions. We see how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs comments on and reacts on the sanctions, secondary sanctions from Donald Trump, and we can see it in the context of the activity of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, who conducted negotiations with the President of China, Xi Jinping, and Abbas Araghchi. Can we come to the conclusion by the result of these negotiations that our ties with key partners allows Russia to synchronize its position in the Asia-Pacific region and elaborate general approaches to the regime of the United States, including on the issue of the purchasing of the energy resources? You have such a question that I just want to reply with yes. You formulated everything. I would like even to say that you took this words from the declaration of BRICS or SCO. Really, our efforts with our partners, with our allies, our collective efforts within the formats as SCO, BRICS, they are directed to strengthen the ties, economic ties between the participants, and do this not only for our own benefit, but to counteract the disbalancing of global economic ties, to respond to the illegal sanctions that hit global economy, global development and logistics, and the security. As for the waves, as you call it, the declarations from Washington, different declarations have been made in Washington in recent months. They spoke about the tariffs. They spoke about some personal items. And I say that, as the President Trump said, that everybody is speaking about the United States, and they like it. Now everybody is speaking about the United States, and that's great. That it's what the current President of the United States said. They speak about it out loud. A lot have been said about Russia and China, our contacts with China, our main trade partner. As you know, we are speaking about the increasing bilateral cooperation in the context of strengthening sanction regime from the West. We are analyzing the situation in economy to minimize the results for the economic activity. We can be sure that the line for further strengthening of relations, of general relations and strategic cooperation with the Chinese People's Republic won't have any changes, and the agreements reached between Moscow and Beijing will be implemented in full, despite all the difficulties introduced by those who like the games in illegal sanctions. What else? To respond to your second part, the second part of your questions, despite the contacts conducted between Minister Lavrov and his partners, Lavrov participated in Malaysia, ASEAN, SCO, in China, ministerial meetings, and as we see, these events and the participation of the Russian delegation with the minister as the head of the delegation, our partners are seriously worried about the tariff wars and the application of illegal sanctions, illegal restrictions. However, the elaboration of collective reaction on the risks at these platforms and this direct matter have not been discussed. It is important that the absolute majority of the countries of Asia have not joined the legal restrictions against Russia. At the same time, they understand that the similar steps hit global economy, finances, logistics, and so on, including general security. Thank you. And the second question, if you allow. We closely follow the events in Kyrgyzia. There, a month ago, the head of the National Trade and Industry Chamber, Sariev, required special status for Kyrgyz in Russia. And a week ago, in the city of Balykchi of Issyk-Kul region, a memorial to Semyonov Tanshansky was destroyed. What is behind these steps? As for the speech, I do not even want to comment on that. As for the memorial, we specified this issue, and here we are talking about the monument to Semyonov Tanshansky that is being dismantled. The demolition is this. Demolition has to do with the restoration of the space and the reconstruction of the area. By the after the reconstruction, the monument will be installed in a different part of the city. Our embassy is following closely the situation and maintains contact with the Russian embassy.
Thank you. Is the magazine Compatriots together with us? Yes, we're always here. Good afternoon. Madam Zakharova, we have an idea and we would like to get your opinion on it. Moscow School number 1539. There's quite an interesting museum dedicated to the heroic Moscow militia. School kids, as well as the kids and grandchildren of the militia fighters, are conducting search operations. Almost all the militia fighters died protecting Moscow. Not all of them have been identified. And search operators, year from year, are conducting their work, trying to establish fates of most people. The museum is gathering more and more exhibit pieces. There are many of these pieces. And then there is a fighting hat with many holes, a German one. Perhaps against the backdrop of the growing militarist intonation from Germany, we could send it to them as a reminder of what this could lead to if they, once again, try to repeat the past. Exactly what do you want to send to them? This hat of the militias, you think they don't have them? It's not about the helmet. It's not about the helmet having holes. It's about the holes in their own heads. So it's not a helmet that should serve as a reminder. There should be something else to help them preserve sane minds from foreign interventions. And according to statements of the German establishment, there's clearly something wrong with their heads. These are not people, I've said this a lot today, those who supposedly should have lived their lives with the feeling of responsibility for the fate of their country, with the specific purpose of not repeating the mistakes of the past. Those who should have done everything to preserve our common history that was written in blood due to the actions of their compatriots, of the so-called German politicians, when in reality they're criminals, according to the order of the Nuremberg trial. And instead, they're dreaming about how they will eliminate all Russian soldiers, how they will rob the country to use more arms to impose the strategic defeat on us. And you talk about sending them helmets. No, actually, let's use our schools, our universities. Let's follow the honorary, beautiful task. Let's create museums. Let's know our own history, and let's do everything in our power so that their threats, their lies, because they will stop at nothing. Let's do everything so that they don't affect our own heads. That's what we need to do, which is exactly what we're trying to do. As for them, we will not be sending them anything. Thank you. I would just like to say that one of the most recurring questions that I receive from people, from journalists, from the public, how do you find it in you to hold back against the aggressive rhetorics and statements, and unacceptable statements coming to our country? You know, sometimes you also start thinking, perhaps we should respond more firmly, but then time and time again you understand that in honor of our ancestors who've showcased extreme patience, who've tolerated and conquered, in honor of them, we will stay on the high level that they have set. We'll respond to lies and offenses with honorary behavior. We will protect our country the only way our heroes know how. Thank you very much. See you again. Wish you all the best.